The father left his son only a sick bull, but the secret it hid changes everything. Caleb Harrison was standing on the wooden porch of the small house, watching the skeletal animal that was now his only inheritance. The bull could barely keep its head up, its dull, lifeless coat telling the story of a creature left to its own fate. The neighbors in the small town had already begun to whisper in the corners, some even chuckling softly when they passed by the property. It had been only 3 days since his father, Joseph Harrison, had passed from this world, leaving Caleb nothing but that 5-hectare rural property and the sick bull that now looked at him with deep, tired eyes. The will had been clear. Everything that remained from 60 years of hard work fit into those few possessions. Caleb felt the weight of disappointment in his chest, mixed with a deep pain he couldn't name. That bull won't last another week. Hank, the neighbor next door, had said, shaking his head with pity. Your father must have been a bit confused lately. What kind of inheritance is this? Caleb said nothing in reply, just kept looking at the animal that seemed as lost as he was. At 32, he had always dreamed of leaving that small town, building a different life in Dallas. Now he found himself tied to land that was worth almost nothing, and a bull that seemed more like a ghost of itself. The sun began to set on the horizon, tinting the dry fields around the property orange. It had been a tough year, with little rain, and that only made things worse for all the breeders in the region. Caleb approached the bull slowly, noticing how the animal backed away, suspicious. Hey, boy, he whispered, trying to calm the creature. You don't know what to do either, do you? The bull stared at him for a moment, as if understanding every word, but soon lowered its head back toward the arid ground. Caleb sighed deeply. He needed to make a decision. He could sell the property for any price and try to start over somewhere else, or stay and try to make something of what he'd inherited. That night, lying in the bed that once belonged to his parents, Caleb couldn't stop thinking about his father. Joseph had always been a man of few words, hard-working, honest, but never seemed to have much success as a breeder. The property had always been small, the income always tight. Caleb remembered the times as a child when he heard arguments between his parents about money, about the difficulties of keeping the land productive. The next morning, he decided the first thing to do was to take better care of the bull. He couldn't just let the animal suffer, regardless of what he decided about his own future. He prepared a bucket of fresh water and got some feed that was left in the back of the shed. Come here, come, he called the animal, shaking the bucket. To his surprise, the bull approached, but hesitantly. Caleb noticed something strange in the creature's behavior. There was an intelligence in its eyes he didn't expect to find. The animal sniffed the feed but didn't eat immediately. Instead, it seemed to examine every grain, as if it knew exactly what it was doing. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. As he watched the bull eat, Caleb heard footsteps approaching. It was Mr. Miller, the oldest neighbor around, a man of nearly 70 who knew everyone and everything in that region. Good morning, Caleb, said Miller, taking off his straw hat. Came to see how you're managing. Good morning, Mr. Miller. I'm trying to take care of this bull my father left. I'm not quite sure what to do with it. Miller approached the animal and examined it carefully. Caleb noticed a strange expression on the older man's face, as if he recognized something about the bull. Is that the same bull your father had about 2 years ago? I think so. Why? Oh, no reason. It's just... Miller hesitated, as if he was about to say something, but changed his mind. Your father was a reserved man, wasn't he? Always kept things to himself. Caleb nodded in confirmation. It was true. Joseph had never been much of a talker, not even with his own son. There was a distance between them that Caleb had never fully understood. After Miller left, Caleb continued observing the bull more closely. There was something about the animal's behavior that intrigued him. He didn't just eat the feed. He seemed selective, choosing certain grains and leaving others aside. Moreover, when other animals approached, some loose chickens and a mutt, the bull assumed a different posture, almost haughty. In the following days, Caleb established a routine. He woke up early, tended to the bull, checked the rest of the property, and tried to organize the papers his father had left behind. The house was simple, but there was a small room that Joseph had always kept locked. Caleb remembered as a child asking about that room, but his father always evaded the question. He decided it was time to open that room. He found the key hanging on a hook in the back of the kitchen, almost hidden behind some old pots. When he turned the lock and pushed the door open, he discovered a space he hadn't expected to find. The room was full of books, papers, notes, and photographs. There were stacks of specialized magazines about cattle ranching, livestock breeding, and animal genetics. Caleb was stunned. He had never imagined his father had an interest in such specific and complex subjects. He began to leaf through some of the materials. There were detailed notes about bovine lineages, crossbreeding, desirable genetic traits. Many of the notes were in Joseph's careful handwriting, but Caleb didn't understand most of the technical terms used. On a makeshift table in the corner of the room, he found a hardcover notebook, clearly used frequently. Opening it, he saw it was a kind of observation diary of his father's. The first pages dated back more than 10 years. March 15, 2013. The cross between the cow Daisy and the bull Majesty is showing promising results. The calf displays unique resistance characteristics. May 22, 2013. I need to be more careful. The neighbors must not suspect what I'm developing here. The project needs to remain secret until it's complete. Caleb felt a chill run down his spine. A project? What project was this that his father had kept secret for so many years? He kept reading, each page revealing an aspect of Joseph he had never known. August 3, 2014. I made contact with Dr. Sterling, the genetics specialist from Dallas. He confirmed my suspicions about the rare lineage I identified. He said it could be worth a fortune in the specialized market. December 12, 2014. I've decided to keep the project completely secret. Caleb is still too young and impatient. When he grows up and matures, perhaps he'll understand the value of what I'm building. Tears began to form in Caleb's eyes. His father had spent years working on something important, something Caleb never knew existed. He felt guilty for all the times he thought Joseph was just an unambitious rancher. He continued flipping through the notebook, discovering that his father had established correspondence with several renowned experts in different regions of the country. There were copies of letters sent and received, all talking about a special project and exceptional genetic characteristics. January 20, 2020. Sundance is responding well to the special treatment. I need to keep him looking frail to protect him from the curious. Few know what he truly represents. Sundance. Caleb ran to the living room window and looked at the bull in the pasture. The animal was lying in the shade of a dead tree, chewing slowly. That seemingly sick and worthless bull had a name, and, from what he was reading, it was no ordinary animal. He returned to the notebook with a racing heart. September 8, 2021. Miller asked some questions about Sundance today. I need to be more cautious. He suspects there's something special about the animal. That explained Miller's strange reaction when he visited the property days ago. The man knew something. Caleb spent the rest of the afternoon reading all the papers he found in the room. He discovered that his father had developed over more than a decade a unique bovine lineage with extraordinary genetic characteristics for disease resistance, longevity, and adaptation to different climates. Sundance was the last pure specimen of this lineage. There were also more recent letters, some from just a few months ago, with astronomical offers to buy the special animal that Joseph possessed. Businessmen from different states showed interest, but all the letters had negative replies from his father. The time is not right yet, Joseph had written in one of the responses. When it is, Caleb will know what to do. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. His mind was buzzing with everything he had discovered. The bull he thought was a miserable inheritance might actually be something extraordinary. But why had his father kept it a secret? Why hadn't he shared all this research with him? The next morning he watched Sundance with completely different eyes. The animal really did look sick, with dull fur and visible ribs, but Caleb began to notice details that had gone unnoticed before. Its movements, though slow, were precise. Its eyes, though sunken, had an intelligent liveliness. And there was something in the animal's posture, that conveyed a certain nobility, even in its seemingly debilitated state. He decided to look for Dr. Sterling mentioned in the letters. There was a phone number written in the notebook. With trembling hands, he dialed the number. "Hello? Dr. Sterling? My name is Caleb Harrison. I'm Joseph Harrison's son." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Caleb? Joseph spoke of you often. I'm sorry for your loss. Your father was an exceptional man. Doctor, I found some of his papers about a project, about Sundance." "Ah, so you've discovered it. Joseph always said you'd understand one day. Caleb, do you have any idea of the treasure your father left you?" "Honestly, no. The bull looks sick, weak." "That was precisely the goal. Joseph developed a special technique to keep the animal's appearance unappealing, protecting it from opportunists. Sundance isn't sick, Caleb. He's being kept in a controlled state." Caleb nearly dropped the phone. "What do you mean?" "Your father discovered a very rare genetic lineage many years ago. Sundance carries unique genes that make him practically immune to several common bovine diseases, in addition to having exceptional reproductive capacity and above-average longevity. In the specialized market, he's worth a fortune." "But why did my father never tell me anything?" "Joseph always said you were impatient, that you wanted to leave the small town. He feared you would sell the animal without understanding its true value. He wanted you to mature first." Caleb fell silent, processing the information. "Caleb, are you still there?" "Yes, Doctor. I'm here. I can help you better understand what your father created. Why don't you come to Dallas next week? We can talk calmly, and I'll show you all the research we did together." After scheduling the meeting and hanging up the phone, Caleb left the house and went straight to where Sundance was resting. He knelt beside the animal, and for the first time truly touched him. The hide, though dull, was softer than he expected. The bull lifted its head and stared at him, and Caleb swore he saw a spark of recognition in those eyes. "I'm sorry, boy," he whispered. "I didn't know. Dad tried to protect me, and I didn't even notice." At that moment, Caleb heard footsteps approaching. He turned and saw a man he didn't know walking toward the property. He was a well-dressed fellow, in a light suit and dress shoes, completely out of place in that rural setting. "Good afternoon," said the man, with a smile Caleb found forced. "You must be Caleb. My name is Preston Vance. I'm a businessman in the specialized cattle industry." Caleb stood up, suspicious. "Good afternoon, how can I help you?" "I heard about your father's passing. My condolences. Joseph was a man of vision. I came here to propose a business deal that might interest you." Preston Vance looked directly at Sundance, and Caleb noticed a greedy gleam in his eyes. "That bull is very poorly cared for, don't you think? I can offer a fair price for him. $5,000. It's a generous amount for an animal in that condition." Caleb felt a growing irritation inside him. Something about the man's tone, the way he looked at Sundance, didn't sit right with him. "The bull is not for sale." "Come on, son, be reasonable. 7,000, that's my final offer. This animal is clearly suffering. It would be a favor to get rid of him." "I said he's not for sale." Preston Vance changed his posture, his smile disappearing. "Caleb, perhaps you don't understand the situation. Your father owed some people money. I have documents proving significant debts. It would be best to accept my offer before things get complicated." "What debts are these?" "Let's just say Joseph took out some informal loans to finance his research. The people who lent the money want it back." Caleb felt his blood run cold. What research had his father financed? And what kind of people made informal loans? "I need to see these documents." "Of course." Preston Vance took a folder from his car. "It's all here. As you can see, it's $15,000 in loans, plus accrued interest. It comes to nearly $25,000. Caleb examined the papers. The signature did look like his father's, but something about those documents didn't seem right. The dates were all recent, from the last 2 months, shortly before Joseph's passing. "My father never told me about these debts. Joseph was too proud to worry his son. But now the responsibility is yours. Accept my offer for the 7,000, and I'll still owe 60. It's the best deal you'll get." Caleb looked at Sundance, then back at Preston Vance. Something about this situation smelled very wrong. "I need time to think." You have 48 hours. After that, the creditors will want a more direct solution. After Preston Vance left, Caleb ran back to his father's secret room. He searched through the papers for any mention of loans or debts, but found nothing. On the contrary, there were some bank statements showing that Joseph had a small amount saved, nothing significant, but enough for his basic needs. He called Dr. Sterling again. "Doctor, did my father owe money to anyone? Did he take out loans to finance the research?" "Absolutely not, Caleb. Joseph was always very careful with money. All the research was done with his own resources gradually. He would never go into debt for it." "So the documents are fake?" "Most likely. We've heard of people trying to take advantage of the situation when a specialized breeder passes away. They know that heirs usually don't understand the true value of the animals." Caleb felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief to know his father hadn't left any real debts, but anger at realizing he was being deceived. "Doctor, what should I do?" "First, don't accept any hasty offers. Second, come to Dallas as soon as possible. I need to show you some things about your father's work. Third, keep Sundance safe. There are people who would do anything to get access to that genetic line." That night, Caleb couldn't take his eyes off Sundance. He set up a chair on the porch and kept watch over the bull, fearing that Preston Vance or someone sent by him might try to take him by force. The animal seemed to sense the tension in the air, staying alert even through the night. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The next morning, Caleb woke to noises coming from the pasture. He ran there and saw 3 men trying to lasso Sundance. The bull was agitated, trying to escape, but clearly at a disadvantage due to his seemingly fragile state. "Hey, what are you doing?" One of the men, a big, tough-looking fellow, approached Caleb. "We're just taking back what's rightfully ours. Your father owed money, now you pay." "Those documents are fake. Get off my property." "Kid, don't make things complicated. You could get hurt." Caleb felt fear growing inside him, but also a steely determination. He wasn't going to let them steal his father's legacy. He ran into the house and called the small-town police station, but the call didn't go through. He tried Mr. Miller's phone. "Miller, I need urgent help. They're trying to steal my father's bull." "I'm on my way, Caleb. Hold tight." When he went back outside, he saw the men had managed to get a rope on Sundance and were trying to pull him off the property. The bull resisted, but was clearly being overpowered. It was at that moment Caleb witnessed something extraordinary. Sundance, who until then seemed like a fragile, sick creature, suddenly changed his behavior completely. His movements became firmer, his muscles more defined, as if an inner strength had awakened. The bull not only freed himself from the ropes with impressive ease, but also assumed a commanding posture that made the 3 men instinctively step back. It was as if the animal had removed a mask and revealed his true nature. "What the hell?" one of the men muttered. At that moment, Mr. Miller arrived with 2 other neighbors. The presence of more people made the thieves give up their attempt, but not before one of them yelled, "This isn't over, kid. We know important people. You'll still hand over that bull to us." After they left, Caleb approached Sundance, still amazed by the transformation he had witnessed. The animal gradually returned to his previous state, but now Caleb knew it was just a facade. "Caleb," said Miller with a serious expression, "I need to tell you some things about your father that you don't know." They sat on the house porch, and Miller began to reveal secrets that had been kept for years. "Your father wasn't just an ordinary breeder, Caleb. He had knowledge he learned when he was young, working with a famous animal genetics specialist. Joseph discovered something important many years ago, but decided to keep it secret to protect you and the discovery. Why didn't you tell me before? Because your father asked me not to. He said you should only know when you were mature enough to handle the responsibility. And also because there are dangerous people interested in his work." Miller explained that Joseph had identified an extremely rare genetic lineage over 15 years ago. Sundance was the result of careful crossbreeding and selection work that produced an animal with unique characteristics. This bull could be the father of a new lineage that will revolutionize cattle ranching, Caleb, but it could also be very dangerous if it falls into the wrong hands. Dangerous how? Unscrupulous people might try to reproduce the lineage irresponsibly without the necessary care, or use the genetic traits to create market monopolies. Your father always wanted this to be used for the good of the rural community, not just to enrich a few. Caleb began to understand the scale of the responsibility he had inherited. It wasn't just a bull, it was the result of years of dedicated work and the potential to transform the lives of many breeders in the region. What should I do, Mr. Miller? First, learn everything you can about your father's work. Second, find the right people to help you. Third, protect Sundance from those who want to take advantage. In the following days, Caleb immersed himself completely in the studies left by his father. He discovered that Joseph had meticulously documented every crossbreeding, every observed characteristic, every result obtained. It was an impressive scientific work, done by someone Caleb never imagined had so much knowledge. He also found more letters, some very recent, from people offering astronomical sums for Sundance. One of the offers reached $60,000, an amount that would make Caleb rich overnight. But there were also letters from small local breeders, people who vaguely knew about Joseph's work and dreamed of having access to that genetics to improve their own herds. These letters touched Caleb's heart in a way the million-dollar offers could not. Dr. G. Sterling finally came to visit him at the property. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and gentle eyes, who examined Sundance with the reverence of someone contemplating a work of art. Caleb, do you have any idea what your father achieved? This animal represents at least 20 years of advancement in the national cattle industry. His genetics could help breeders across the country have more resistant, productive, and healthy herds. But why keep him looking so sickly? Protection. Joseph knew that if Sundance showed all his vitality, it would draw unwanted attention. He developed a feeding and care technique that keeps the animal healthy internally, but looking frail externally. Dr. Sterling explained the process. Sundance received a special diet that controlled his weight and the appearance of his coat, but provided all the nutrients needed to maintain his perfect health. It was a complex technique that Joseph had perfected over the years. Now that you know the truth, Caleb, the animal can gradually return to his normal appearance, but this must be done carefully to avoid sudden attention. Caleb began to apply the instructions left by his father to restore Sundance's true appearance. Gradually, day by day, the animal began to show signs of his real vitality. His coat gained shine, his muscles became more defined, his posture more proud. It was like watching a magical transformation, but Caleb knew there was nothing magical about it. It was the result of scientific knowledge applied with patience and dedication. During this process, other characters began to appear in Caleb's story. First was Abigail, a young, recently graduated veterinarian who worked in the region and had heard rumors about a special bull on the Harrison property. Caleb, can I take a look at your animal? I'm doing research on bovine genetics, and I heard your father had some interesting knowledge on the subject. Caleb hesitated, but something in Abigail's sincerity made him trust her. When the veterinarian examined Sundance, her eyes widened in surprise. This animal has characteristics I've never seen before. The muscle structure, the body conformation, even the way he behaves. It's extraordinary. Abigail became an important ally for Caleb. She helped him better understand the technical aspects of Joseph's work, and also to plan how to use that knowledge responsibly. But not all new contacts were welcome. Preston Vance returned, this time accompanied by a lawyer, claiming to have new documents that proved rights over Sundance. Caleb, don't be stubborn. I have here a power of attorney signed by your father giving me rights over this animal. It's notarized. Caleb examined the document. It looked official, but something didn't add up. This signature is not my father's. Prove it. Until you can prove it's fake, the document is valid. The pressure was mounting. Caleb realized he needed to make quick decisions to protect Joseph's legacy. It was then that Dr. Sterling made him a proposal. Caleb, how about we create a breeding program here on your property? We can bring other breeders from the region, teach the techniques your father developed, and use Sundance in a controlled way to improve the local herds. The idea excited Caleb. It was a way to honor his father's work, while also helping the rural community of the region. But what about the opportunists? How will we protect ourselves? By creating a cooperative. If several breeders are involved, it becomes harder for people like Preston Vance to try to appropriate the work. Caleb talked to Mr. Miller and other neighbors about the idea. The response was enthusiastic. Many small breeders in the region dreamed of having access to technologies that could improve their living conditions. That's how the Verdant Valley Breeding Co-op was born, a name that honored the region where they lived. Caleb donated the use of Sundance to the cooperative, maintaining ownership of the animal, but allowing its genetic potential to be utilized by the entire community. The first official test of Sundance's genetic quality was done 3 months after Caleb discovered the truth about his inheritance. Dr. Sterling brought specialized equipment from Dallas and conducted detailed examinations of the animal. The results exceeded even the most optimistic expectations. Sundance possessed unique genetic markers indicating resistance to at least 7 common bovine diseases, reproductive capacity 40% above the national average, and a potential lifespan of up to 25 years, almost double the normal average. "Caleb, this animal is worth more than I imagined," said Dr. Sterling, examining the test results. "We're talking about a national genetic asset." But the true test of Sundance's value came unexpectedly. A bovine disease crisis hit the region, affecting herds on several properties. It was a rare illness, resistant to conventional treatments, that was causing major losses for breeders. Abigail, the veterinarian, suggested an experiment. "What if we place some infected cows near Sundance? Let's see if he really has the resistance the tests indicate." The experiment was conducted with all scientific care. 5 cows showing symptoms of the disease were placed in the same pasture as Sundance, while another 5 equally infected cows remained isolated as a control group. The results were impressive. The cows that stayed near Sundance recovered in half the time of the others, and their symptoms were much milder. It seemed the animal's presence exerted some kind of positive influence on the health of the other cattle. "This is scientifically inexplicable," murmured Abigail, examining the data. "It's not inexplicable," said Dr. Sterling. "Joseph mentioned in his last letters that he had discovered something about Sundance's social behavior. He seemed to have highly developed herd protection instincts. Further research revealed that Sundance produced unique pheromones that positively affected the immune systems of other nearby cattle. It was a characteristic that went beyond individual genetics. The animal functioned as a natural guardian of the herd's health. This discovery changed everything. It wasn't just about a bull with good genetics, but an animal that could revolutionize how herds were managed, drastically reducing the use of medication and improving the overall health of animal groups." News of the Verdant Valley experiments began to spread. Breeders from other regions started seeking out Caleb, wanting to understand how the co-op's program worked. Universities sent researchers to study the phenomenon. The specialized media began taking an interest in the story. Caleb, who just a few months earlier thought he had inherited only a sick bull and a worthless property, now found himself at the center of a revolution in Brazilian cattle ranching. But success also brought new challenges. Preston Vance returned, this time with a different strategy. "Caleb, congratulations on your success. I'm a businessman, and I recognize a golden opportunity when I see one. How about we become partners? I can bring investment capital, commercial structure, contacts in the national and international market." The offer was tempting. Preston Vance offered to build a state-of-the-art research center on Caleb's property, hire the best specialists in the country, and make the program known worldwide. In return, he wanted 60% of the profits from all activities related to Sundance. "It's a generous proposal, Caleb. You would remain the owner of the animal, but we would have a business partnership." Caleb asked for time to think. He spoke with Dr. Sterling, with Abigail, with Mr. Miller, and with the other members of the co-op. Opinions were divided. "It's a chance to grow very fast," said Abigail, "but it also means losing control over how your father's work will be used." "Your father always wanted this to benefit the local community first," Miller reminded him. "Would a big company maintain that philosophy?" Dr. Sterling was more direct. "Caleb, I know Preston Vance from other situations. He has a reputation for promising a lot at the beginning and then gradually changing the terms of the agreements. Be very careful. The decision became even more complicated when Caleb discovered that Preston Vance wasn't just an interested businessman. In fact, he represented an international consortium that had been trying to monopolize bovine genetic improvement technologies in Latin America. The information came through an unexpected source, an investigative journalist from Dallas who was doing a report on biopiracy, the wrongful appropriation of Brazilian genetic resources by foreign companies. "Caleb, you need to know who you're dealing with," the journalist said over the phone. "Preston Vance has already tried to appropriate the work of other Brazilian researchers. There's a lawsuit pending against him for misuse of intellectual property." The journalist sent documents showing that the consortium represented by Preston Vance had tried to patent genetic lineages developed by Brazilian researchers, claiming rights to the discoveries. "If he gains access to your father's work, he could register international patents and prevent other Brazilians from using the technology that was developed here." Caleb felt a mix of anger and determination. He wasn't going to allow Joseph's work to be stolen by foreign opportunists. He decided to reject Preston Vance's proposal and further strengthen the local cooperative. With the help of Dr. Sterling and Abigail, he developed an expansion program that prioritized Brazilian breeders, especially small rural producers. Preston Vance's response was swift and aggressive. 2 days after receiving the refusal, Caleb received a legal summons, alleging he was improperly using intellectual property that belonged to the international consortium. "How is it their intellectual property?" Caleb asked the lawyer he hired to defend him. "They claim the techniques used by your father were originally developed by a researcher working for the consortium. They say Joseph had improper access to that information and developed his work based on research that wasn't his." It was a serious accusation that, if proven, could result in the loss of all rights to Sundance and the techniques developed by Joseph. Caleb returned to the papers left by his father with renewed urgency. He needed to find proof that Joseph's work was original, developed independently. It was during this search that he made a discovery that changed everything. At the bottom of a drawer in the secret room, he found a small chest that had gone unnoticed before. Inside were documents dating back more than 30 years. There were certificates, diplomas, and correspondence showing that Joseph, in his youth, had studied with some of the country's greatest bovine genetics specialists. There were also research notes he had made back in the 1990s, long before the international consortium even existed. But the most important discovery was a document signed by a renowned professor, recognizing Joseph as a co-author of pioneering research on bovine genetic markers. The research had been published in an international scientific journal in 1995. "Caleb, this is gold," said the lawyer, examining the documents. "These papers prove not only that your father was a legitimate researcher, but that he participated in fundamental discoveries in the field. If anyone is using stolen ideas, it's not him." With this evidence, Caleb managed not only to defend himself against the accusation, but also to discover that the international consortium itself was using techniques originally developed by Brazilian researchers, including his father. The investigative journalist became even more interested in the story when he learned of the new documents. "Caleb, this is bigger than we imagined. We have here a classic case of appropriation of Brazilian technology by foreign companies. Can I publish this story?" Caleb authorized the publication, and the report caused a national impact. The case ended up on the news of several television stations, and Caleb found himself transformed into a symbol of the fight against biopiracy. Sundance also gained national fame. The bull that just a few months earlier seemed like a sick and worthless animal was now considered a Brazilian genetic treasure by the media. But fame brought new challenges. Caleb's property began receiving visitors from all over the country. Researchers, students, curious breeders, and even tourists came to see the famous bull of Verdant Valley. "Caleb, we need to organize this better," said Abigail. "Sundance is getting stressed with so many people, and you also need more privacy." That's when Caleb had the idea to transform the property into a rural research and education center. With the help of the cooperative and support from a university in Dallas, he created the Harrison Institute for Bovine Genetics. The institute offered courses for breeders, developed applied research, and maintained an affordable genetic improvement program for small producers across the country. Sundance became the official patriarch of the program, but now lived in more suitable conditions, with constant veterinary care and an environment protected from excessive curiosity. Caleb hired Abigail as the head veterinarian of the institute and Dr. Sterling as the scientific director. Mr. Miller was appointed as a special consultant, representing the interests of the local community. 6 months after discovering the truth about his inheritance, Caleb was participating in an international symposium on bovine genetics, presenting the results obtained with Sundance to experts from various countries. Ladies and gentlemen, what I will present today is not just about an exceptional animal, but about how scientific knowledge applied with patience and dedication can transform entire lives. In the audience, Caleb saw the faces of breeders who had benefited from the program, researchers interested in collaborating, and even some competitors who respected the work being done. But what moved him most was seeing in the front row an empty chair with a photo of Joseph. It was a tribute the organizing committee had prepared, recognizing the contribution of the man who dedicated decades to developing that technology. During his presentation, Caleb spoke not only about the scientific aspects of the research, but also about the emotional journey he had lived to discover his father's true legacy. For years, I thought my father was just a breeder, without ambition, without big dreams. Today I know he was a visionary who sacrificed personal recognition to protect a discovery that could benefit thousands of people. Sundance is not just a bull with good genetics. He represents proof that American science can compete with anywhere in the world, as long as it has dedication, patience, and, above all, social purpose. At the end of the presentation, Caleb received a standing ovation that lasted more than 5 minutes. Several partnership proposals were made, but he had already learned to be selective, prioritizing collaborations that respected the values his father defended. Preston Vance disappeared from the scene after the public exposure of his questionable practices. The international consortium faced investigations in several countries for misappropriation of intellectual property. Caleb never heard from them directly again, but he knew to remain vigilant against future attempts at appropriation. The success of the Institute brought profound transformations to the entire Verdant Valley region. Properties that once barely managed to sustain themselves now had healthy and productive herds. Young people who had plans to leave the countryside to try their luck in the big cities found interesting opportunities in modern cattle ranching. Caleb became a national reference in bovine genetics, but he never lost his humility or forgot his origins. He continued to live in the same house where he grew up, now renovated and equipped with a modern office, but preserving the simple essence of rural life. Sundance gradually had calves with selected cows from the region. Each new calf was monitored from birth by a multidisciplinary team that studied the transmission of the special genetic characteristics. The results confirmed that the lineage developed by Joseph was consistent and transmissible. In 2 years, the program had already benefited more than 200 breeders from 15 American states. The technology developed by Joseph was being adapted for different regions and climates, always with a focus on sustainability and social benefit. Caleb received several honors and awards, but the one that moved him most was a simple plaque placed at the entrance to the property by neighbors in the region. Here lives the legacy of a man who dreamed of making his community's life better. Caleb's relationship with Sundance had also evolved. What began as distrust and disappointment turned into a respectful partnership. Caleb came to understand that the animal was not just a means to an end, but a partner who deserved care and consideration. You knew everything from the start, didn't you? Caleb would sometimes talk to the bull while tending to him in the late afternoon. Dad taught you to wait for the right moment. Sundance, now with a majestic appearance that matched his genetic importance, seemed to understand every word. He had developed a special bond with Caleb, showing affection and trust that went far beyond the normal behavior of a bovine. Abigail, who followed this evolution professionally, was impressed by the intelligence the animal demonstrated. "Caleb, I've never seen a bull with such complex behaviors. It's as if he understands his own importance and responsibility." Dr. Sterling agreed. Joseph always said there was something special about Sundance's behavior, beyond the genetic traits. Perhaps the careful selection preserved not only physical traits, but also unique personality characteristics. The research at the Institute revealed that Sundance exhibited levels of bovine intelligence significantly above average. He could solve simple problems, demonstrated exceptional memory for people and places, and displayed natural leadership behaviors when with other cattle. These discoveries opened new lines of research into the relationship between genetics and intelligence in cattle, a field of study that had until then received little scientific attention. The Institute began to attract international researchers interested not only in physical genetic improvement, but also in the development of desirable behavioral traits in herds. Caleb, who had begun this journey thinking in purely practical and financial terms, found himself involved in deep scientific and philosophical questions about the relationship between humans and animals. 3 years after discovering the truth about his inheritance, Caleb received a special invitation to present the work developed at the Institute at an International Animal Genetics Congress in a European capital. It was the first time he would travel outside the country, and the first time Joseph's work would be recognized on an international level. Caleb accepted the invitation, but not before arranging everything so Sundance would be well cared for in his absence. "You'll be fine, won't you?" he said to the bull on the eve of his trip. "When I return, I'll tell you all about presenting Dad's work to the whole world." Sundance approached and rested his head against Caleb's chest, a gesture of affection that always moved him. During the International Congress, Caleb presented not only the technical data from the research, but also the human story behind the discovery. He spoke about Joseph, about the unexpected discovery, about the challenges faced, and about how a seemingly modest inheritance had turned into something extraordinary. The presentation made a strong impact on the international audience. Several researchers approached to propose collaborations, but Caleb had already learned to carefully evaluate every opportunity. "Professor Caleb," said a German scientist after the presentation, "your work in Brazil is impressive, but I'm also interested in the personal story you told. What is it like to live through such a radical transformation?" The question made Caleb reflect on everything that had happened in his life over the past few years. "I discovered that sometimes we receive exactly what we need, but not in the way we expect. My father left me much more than I imagined, but I only managed to see it when I stopped looking for what I thought I should find." Back in Brazil, Caleb was welcomed as a national hero. The story of the bull that changed a life had become known across the country, inspiring others to value the legacies left by their families. The Institute had grown during his absence. Abigail had coordinated the development of 3 new research projects, and Dr. Sterling had established partnerships with 5 Brazilian universities. But the biggest surprise awaited Caleb in the pasture where Sundance lived. The bull was not alone. A careful breeding experiment had been conducted, and now 3 calves were playing beside their father, representing the second generation of the special lineage developed by Joseph. "Caleb, the first genetic tests on the calves confirmed they inherited the special traits from their father," said Abigail, showing the test results. "The lineage is stable and transmissible." Caleb knelt in the middle of the pasture and watched the small family of special cattle. It was the definitive confirmation that Joseph's work would be perpetuated for generations to come. "Dad did it," he whispered. "He really managed to create something lasting." In that moment, Caleb fully understood what his father had done. It wasn't just about bovine genetics, but about creating a legacy that would benefit people for decades. Joseph had planted a seed that would keep growing long after his departure. The calves approached Caleb curiously, showing the same intelligence and trust that characterized Sundance. It was as if they carried not only the special genes, but also the unique personality that made that lineage so special. "You're going to help a lot of people," said Caleb, petting the small animals, "just like your dad is helping." Sundance approached and stood beside Caleb, as if officially introducing his offspring. It was a moment of completeness that Caleb knew his father would have been proud to witness. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. That night, Caleb did something he hadn't done in years. He visited the cemetery where Joseph was buried. He brought a photo of the calves and sat beside the simple headstone marking his father's resting place. Dad, I understand everything now. You left me much more than I imagined. It wasn't about money. It was about purpose. You taught me that true wealth lies in making a difference in people's lives. Sundance is well, the calves are healthy, and hundreds of families are already benefiting from your work. But most importantly, I learned to value what truly matters. Caleb stayed there for over an hour, telling his father about everything that had happened, about the challenges overcome, about the people who had become important in his life, about the dreams he now had for the future. When he finally stood up to leave, he felt a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. The anger he carried for years over feeling abandoned had been replaced by deep gratitude. On the way back home, Caleb passed by Mr. Miller's property. The neighbor was on the porch enjoying the night breeze. "Caleb, how was the talk with your father?" "It was good, Mr. Miller, very good. Thank you for keeping his secrets all these years." "Joseph was my friend, Caleb. And you've become a son to me too. I'm proud of the man you've become." They talked late into the night about future plans for the Institute, about the next generations of special cattle, about how to expand the program to benefit even more breeders. "Caleb, can I give you some advice?" "Of course, Mr. Miller." "Don't forget to live your own life too. Your father did a wonderful job, but now it's your turn to build your own legacy. Sundance and the Institute will keep growing, but you need to be happy as a person, not just as the guardian of an inheritance." The advice made Caleb think about aspects of his life he had neglected over the last few years. He had been so focused on honoring his father's work and developing the Institute that he hadn't dedicated time to personal relationships or to discovering what he really wanted for himself. That's when he realized that Abigail had become more than just a co-worker. During all those months working together, he had developed feelings for her that he kept pushing aside, thinking he should dedicate himself entirely to the project. A few days later, Caleb invited Abigail for a simple dinner on his house's porch, not to discuss work, but just to talk as people. "Abigail, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, Caleb. What do you really think about all of this that's happened? About this whole transformation?" "I think you discovered who you really are, Caleb. In the beginning, when we met, you seemed lost, confused about your place in the world. Today you have purpose, direction, and most importantly, you found a way to contribute to something bigger than yourself." "And you? What has all of this meant for you?" Abigail smiled a little shyly. "It meant working alongside someone I admire very much, both professionally and personally. It meant being part of something revolutionary for Brazilian cattle farming. And it meant, well, it meant falling in love with the person you've become." Caleb felt his heart race. It was the first time they had spoken openly about the feelings that had developed between them. "Abigail, I have too. I mean, during all this time working together, you've become the most important person in my life. But I was afraid of ruining our professional partnership." "Caleb, you don't have to choose between personal life and work. We can build something together in both areas." That night, Caleb realized he had found not only the meaning of the legacy left by his father, but also the possibility of building his own happiness. The relationship between Caleb and Abigail evolved naturally. They continued working together at the Institute, but now they also planned a life together. Abigail moved to the ranch, and together they transformed Joseph's old house into a welcoming home that preserved the memory of the past while embracing the future. The wedding was simple, celebrated on the ranch itself, with the presence of neighbors, co-workers, and researchers who had become friends during the journey. Sundance and his calves were special guests, observing the ceremony from a nearby pasture, decorated especially for the occasion. During the celebration, Mr. Miller made an emotional toast. "Caleb, your father would be very proud to see the man you've become and the family you're building. Joseph always dreamed that you would find your own happiness in your own way." Dr. Sterling also spoke. Rarely do we witness a transformation as complete as Caleb's. He honored Joseph's scientific legacy, but he also learned that science serves to improve lives, including one's own. The Institute continued growing under the joint leadership of Caleb and Abigail. They developed new educational programs, expanded research to include other animal species, and established respectful international partnerships that benefited Brazil. Sundance, now the patriarch of a large family of special cattle, lived surrounded by affection and respect from everyone. He had become not only an animal of priceless genetic value, but a symbol of how knowledge applied with love and dedication can transform realities. 5 years after the initial discovery, the Institute was receiving delegations from various countries interested in learning about the Brazilian model of genetic improvement with social responsibility. Caleb had become an international reference, but he always kept his feet on the ground and his focus on the values learned from his father. On a particularly beautiful afternoon, Caleb was in the pasture watching Sundance play with his grandchildren. A new generation of special calves had recently been born. Abigail approached and stood by his side, her hand resting gently on her already rounded belly. They were expecting their first child. "Caleb, what are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking about how surprising life is, Abigail. A few years ago I thought I had only inherited a problem. Today I know I inherited an opportunity to make a difference in the world." "And what do you want to leave for our son?" Caleb looked at Sundance, then at the institute he had built, then at the wife he loved. "I want to leave the example that we don't always get what we expect, but we always get what we need. I want to teach that the true value of things isn't in their appearance, but in their essence. And most of all, I want to show that when we care for something with love, that thing grows and multiplies in ways we never imagined." That afternoon, Caleb wrote a letter to his unborn child. "My dear son or daughter, when you are born, you will inherit much more than material possessions. You will inherit a story of transformation, a lesson about perseverance, and proof that true love sometimes disguises itself as a challenge. Your grandfather Joseph, whom you never got to meet physically, left an extraordinary legacy for our family. Not only the scientific knowledge he developed, but mainly the example that we should work not just for ourselves, but to make the world a better place. Sundance, whom you will meet when you grow up, is more than a special animal. He represents the patience, dedication, and vision for the future that your grandfather had. He also represents my journey of growth and discovery. But the most important thing I can leave you is this: always value the people who love you, even when you don't fully understand the ways that love manifests itself. Your grandfather loved me enough to prepare me for a responsibility I didn't even know existed. Be curious, be brave, but above all, be kind. The world needs people who use their talents to help others. With all my love, your father, Caleb." Caleb folded the letter carefully and stored it in the same drawer where he had found the first documents about Joseph's work. One day, when his son was mature enough, he would read those words and understand the continuity of a legacy that transcended generations. That night, Caleb and Abigail dined on the porch, watching Sundance and his family in the pasture illuminated by the full moon. It was a scene of absolute peace, very different from the confusion and anguish Caleb felt just a few years before. "Abigail, do you believe my father knew things would happen exactly like this?" "Caleb, I think your father knew you had potential for great things, but you needed a nudge to discover it. Sundance was that nudge. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had sold the bull at the beginning, like many people advised me to do. But you didn't sell. And you didn't sell because deep down something told you there was more to the story. That was also part of Joseph's plans. He knew you better than you knew yourself." Caleb agreed. Throughout that journey, there were moments when he seemed to be guided by something greater than his own conscious decisions. Perhaps it was intuition. Perhaps it was truly some kind of connection with the father who had departed. Or perhaps it was simply the power of true love to influence choices even from a distance. Regardless of the explanation, Caleb felt grateful for having been strong enough to resist the external pressures and to discover for himself the value of the legacy he had received. The Institute continued expanding its activities. New researchers joined the team, new projects were developed, and the influence of the work reached increasingly distant regions. But Caleb always kept the focus on the original values, benefiting primarily the small-scale breeders, maintaining sustainable practices, and using science in service to the community. On a special afternoon, Caleb received a visit from a delegation of breeders from the northeast. They were simple people who had traveled hundreds of miles to learn about the work developed at the Institute. "Professor Caleb," said the group's leader, "we heard about you on the radio. They said you are helping small breeders like us improve our animals." "That's true. That is exactly the goal of our work. The question we want to ask is, does this work for cattle adapted to the dry climate? Our animals are different from the ones here in the south." Caleb smiled. That question showed the work was truly reaching the people who needed it most. "Let's go to the pasture to see Sundance, and I'll explain how we can adapt the techniques for your reality." During the visit to the pasture, Caleb noticed something interesting. Sundance seemed to sense that those visitors were special. He approached the group with curiosity, allowing the people to touch him and examine his features. "This bull has a different look in his eyes," commented one of the women in the group. "It's like he understands us." Caleb explained about Sundance's special behavioral characteristics, his above-average intelligence, and how these traits were passed on to the calves. "Would you like to see something interesting?" Caleb called Sundance by name and made a few simple gestures. The animal responded promptly, demonstrating behaviors that seemed more like a pet dog than a bovine. The group was impressed, but Caleb quickly explained that the important thing wasn't to have an animal that performed tricks, but rather to understand how positive behavioral characteristics could be developed and transmitted. An intelligent and docile bull is easier to handle, experiences less stress, produces better, and lives longer. This translates into real economic benefits for the breeder. The conversation went on for several hours. Caleb showed the practical results obtained with breeders from different regions, explained how to adapt the techniques for different climatic and economic realities, and, most importantly, conveyed the work philosophy developed by Joseph. The idea is not to create dependency on expensive or complicated technologies. The idea is to teach principles that each breeder can apply in their own reality with the resources they have available. Before leaving, the group's leader asked for a photo next to Sundance. It was to show their community that they had truly met the special bull they had heard so much about. "Professor Caleb, you've changed the way we think about breeding. We'll return home with hope for improving our conditions. The hope was always within you, you just needed some information to put it into practice." Episodes like this became frequent in the Institute's routine. Caleb realized his role had evolved beyond that of a researcher or a rural businessman. He had become an educator, someone who helped other people discover the potential they already possessed. It was while reflecting on this evolution that Caleb decided to write a book telling his whole story. Not just the technical aspects of the work with genetic breeding, but especially the personal journey of discovery and transformation. "Abigail, I think I should write about all of this we've lived through. Perhaps our story can inspire other people who are going through similar situations." "I think it's a great idea, Caleb. How many people might be underestimating legacies they've received simply because they don't know how to look beyond appearances?" Caleb began writing on winter nights, when the work at the Institute allowed more time for reflection. He wrote by hand in simple notebooks, in the same way Joseph had documented his research. The book was structured as a personal narrative, telling the story from the moment he received the seemingly insignificant inheritance to the complete transformation of his life. But Caleb was careful to interweave the personal story with useful information about genetic breeding, so the book could also serve as an educational resource. Chapter 1. The Bull Nobody Wanted, the book began. When my father passed away, leaving me only a sick bull and a struggling property, I thought my life had hit rock bottom. I couldn't imagine I was, in fact, at the beginning of the greatest adventure of my life. The writing process was also a process of self-discovery for Caleb. By putting everything he had lived through on paper, he managed to better understand his own feelings and reactions during that journey. He realized, for example, that his initial anger toward his father wasn't really about the inheritance, but about the feeling that Joseph had never trusted him enough to share his dreams and projects. Through writing, Caleb managed to make complete peace with that hurt, understanding that his father had acted that way not from a lack of trust, but from an excess of protection and care. The book took 2 years to complete. When it was ready, Caleb decided to publish it independently, with the help of a local print shop. The first edition was small, just 1,000 copies, distributed mainly among local breeders and participants in the Institute's programs. The response was immediate and surprising. People who read the book started telling others, and soon there was a demand that exceeded the production capacity of the small local print shop. A publisher from Dallas became interested in the book and proposed a national reprint. Caleb accepted, but on the condition that part of the profits be allocated to funding educational programs for low-income breeders. The Hidden Legacy, the story of the bull that transformed a life, became an unexpected bestseller, not only among people connected to cattle ranching, but also among readers interested in stories of personal triumph. Caleb began receiving invitations to give lectures in different cities. Whenever possible, he accepted, especially when the audience was made up of rural breeders or young students of agronomy and veterinary science. During a lecture at a university in Dallas, a student asked a question that deeply marked Caleb. "Professor Caleb, what was the exact moment when you understood the real value of your inheritance?" Caleb thought for a moment before answering. "It wasn't a specific moment, but rather a gradual process. But if I had to choose a symbolic moment, I would say it was when I saw Sundance protect a child who had gotten lost on the property. In that moment, I understood it wasn't just about genetics or money, but about character. My father had developed not just an animal with good genetics, but an animal with special personality traits. And did that change your perspective on people as well?" "Completely. I learned that we can't always see people's true value at first glance. Just like Sundance seemed sick but was extraordinary, many people around us may have qualities we don't immediately perceive." These reflections led Caleb to develop a new project at the Institute, a mentorship program for rural youth. The idea was to identify young people with potential who perhaps lacked opportunities or didn't know how to develop their talents. The program started small, with just 5 young people from the region, but grew quickly. Caleb discovered he had a natural talent for spotting potential in people who were often underestimated by others. "Caleb," Abigail remarked one afternoon, "you're doing for these young people what you wish someone had done for you when you were younger." It was true. Caleb remembered how lost and directionless he felt before discovering his father's legacy. Now he had the chance to help other young people find their paths without having to go through the same moments of doubt and confusion. One of the young people in the mentorship program was Wyatt, the son of a small local rancher who had lost almost his entire herd during a severe drought. Wyatt was only 16, but showed an intuitive understanding of animal behavior that impressed even experienced veterinarians. "Wyatt, have you ever thought about studying veterinary medicine?" Caleb asked during one of the mentoring sessions. "Professor, my family barely has money for food. How am I going to pay for college? Let's see what alternatives exist. Talent like yours can't be wasted." Caleb secured a scholarship for Wyatt at a university in Dallas and also a part-time job at the Institute so the young man could support himself during his studies. Cases like Wyatt's multiplied. The Institute became known not only for scientific research, but also for its human development work in the region. During an interview for a national magazine, the journalist asked Caleb, "What is the greatest legacy your father truly left you?" Caleb answered without hesitation, "My father taught me that the true value of things isn't in their appearance, but in their potential. That applies to animals, to people, to opportunities, to everything in life. He taught me to look beneath the surface." "And what is the legacy you want to leave for future generations?" "I want to leave the example that it's possible to use scientific knowledge to improve the lives of entire communities, not just to enrich a few privileged individuals. I want to show that true fulfillment comes from contributing to something bigger than ourselves." The interview was published in a special edition of the magazine about Americans making a difference. The response brought even more visibility to the Institute's work, but Caleb had already learned to handle fame without letting it carry him away. By this time, Sundance had become the patriarch of a large family. His children and grandchildren were spread across various ranches in the region and other states, always through the Institute's controlled program that ensured the responsible use of the special genetics. Caleb made a point of periodically visiting the ranches where there were animals descended from Sundance, not only to monitor the genetic development, but mainly to verify if the benefits were truly reaching the ranchers' families. On one of these visits, he met Mrs. Jenkins, a 65-year-old widow who raised cattle on a small property in the countryside. She had received a heifer descended from Sundance through the Institute's social program. "Professor Caleb, you can't imagine how that heifer changed my life. She doesn't get sick like the other animals, produces more milk, and it even seems like she improves the health of the other animals around her." "Mrs. Jenkins, are you managing to support yourself better now?" "Much better. And most importantly, my grandson, who wanted to leave for the city, now wants to stay and learn about raising cattle. He says he sees a future in the land." Stories like Mrs. Jenkins's had become Roberto's greatest reward. Seeing entire families have their lives transformed by the work started by Joseph gave meaning to all the efforts and challenges faced. Roberto and Carla's son was born on a sunny spring morning. He was baptized Joseph in honor of his grandfather. From his earliest days, little Joseph showed a special curiosity about the animals on the property. "Roberto, look how quiet he is when he's near Sundance," commented Carla, observing the baby in her arms as they visited the pasture. Sundance, in turn, seemed to have developed a special protective instinct towards the child. Whenever the family was in the pasture, the bull would position himself nearby, like a gentle but vigilant guardian. "I think Sundance recognizes that this child is special to us," said Roberto. "It's impressive how he seems to understand human relationships." When Joseph turned 2, he was already walking through the pasture with the confidence of someone born in that environment. Sundance allowed the child to approach freely, demonstrating a patience and care Roberto had never seen in a bovine. "Daddy, pretty bull," little Joseph would say, pointing at Sundance. "Yes, my son. That bull is very special. When you grow up, I'll tell you his whole story." Roberto sometimes caught himself imagining what it would be like when Joseph grew up and discovered the whole family's story. Would he be another generation to carry on the legacy started by his grandfather? But Roberto had also learned that each person needs to find their own path. If little Joseph showed interest in cattle ranching and research, it would be wonderful. If he chose another direction in life, he would also be respected and supported. "The important thing," Roberto said to Carla in a conversation about their son's future, "is that he grows up knowing he can make a difference in the world, whatever field he chooses." The Institute had established itself as a national and international reference. Researchers from various countries came to study the Brazilian model of genetic improvement with social responsibility. Roberto received invitations to advise similar programs in other Latin American countries. But no matter how much the work grew and gained international projection, Roberto always maintained a connection to his origins. He continued living on the same property, personally caring for Sundance, participating in the life of the local community. "Roberto," said Mr. Miller during a conversation on the porch, "do you remember when you were young and wanted to leave here to conquer the world?" "I do, Mr. Miller. Why do you ask?" "It's just that you conquered the world by staying right here. I think that's an important lesson." It was true, Roberto had discovered that he didn't need to abandon his roots to be successful. On the contrary, it was precisely by valuing and developing what he already had that he managed to build something truly meaningful. This reflection inspired him to write a second book, this time specifically focused on rural youth. Roots and Wings, Growing Without Forgetting Where You Came From, became required reading in many agricultural technical schools across the country. The book addressed the issue of how young people can seek personal and professional growth without necessarily abandoning their communities of origin. It showed practical examples of how it's possible to innovate and be an entrepreneur in a rural environment, contributing to local development. During the launch of his second book, Roberto was asked about his plans for the future. "Professor Roberto, you've already achieved much more than most people dream of. What are your next goals?" "My next goal is to see little Joaquim grow up healthy and happy. It's to continue learning from Dorado, who still surprises me regularly. It's to expand our mentorship program to reach more young people. And, most importantly, it's to continue honoring my father's memory through work that benefits others. Do you consider yourself a fulfilled person? Roberto looked out the window of the bookstore where the launch was being held, and for a moment imagined he could see in the distant landscape the ranch where it all began. I consider myself a grateful person. Grateful to have discovered that sometimes we receive exactly what we need, even when it's not what we expected. Grateful to have had a father who loved me enough to prepare me for a responsibility I didn't even know existed. And grateful to have found a way to use my talents to contribute to something bigger than myself. End of story. This was a fictional story created to touch our hearts. Now tell us what you thought. Do you believe Roberto made the right choices in valuing his father's legacy? Where are you watching from, and what was the moment that moved you the most? Leave your honest opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.